Mother talks about the hardest moment of her life, the phone call telling her her pregnant daughter was dead.
Bolivia Williams died after someone shot her a week ago today in Bladen County. Her boyfriend is in jail tonight, charged with her murder and the murder of her unborn child. WECT's Ava Brengord sat down with Williams' mother to talk about her heartbreaking loss. Ava, she says they embraced Bolivia's boyfriend into the family before the shooting happened.
No, you missed that thing. Think it's beautiful little baby over here in the background. She sleep. It's my little mama, my twin.
Just 48 hours after celebrating the promise of new life, 30-year-old Bolivia Monique Williams was found dead, shot multiple times in her own home. The joyous echoes of her gender reveal party, where blue confetti rained down and the name Isaiah James was lovingly spoken aloud for the first time, were quickly replaced by sirens, horror, and unanswered questions. A devoted mother of 5, Bolivia had just announced she was expecting her 6th child, a baby boy, with her boyfriend, Najee Leach. Friends said she beamed with happiness that weekend, laughing, hugging, glowing with the anticipation of a new beginning. But by Tuesday morning, she was gone. And the man who was supposed to protect her, who helped plan the party, was accused of pulling the trigger. How does love transform into such violence? What could make someone destroy a future they once helped create? What state or country are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Let's hear your thoughts on this story. And stay tuned, because the story behind Bolivia's final hours is more haunting than anyone could have imagined. Who was Bolivia Monique Williams? To her 5 children, she wasn't just mom, she was the entire universe. Bolivia Monique Williams, a 33-year-old from North Carolina, was known for her relentless love, resilience, and dedication to her family. Life hadn't always been kind to her, but she faced its challenges with grace and determination. In the eyes of those who knew her, Bolivia was a provider, protector, and source of strength, fiercely committed to giving her kids a better life than the one she had. Friends and family describe her as someone who didn't back down from hard times. Whether it was juggling jobs, helping with schoolwork, or making birthdays special on a budget, Bolivia found ways to fill her children's lives with warmth. Her smile lit up rooms, and her laughter echoed through the house, even on days when money was tight or the future seemed uncertain. For her, motherhood wasn't a role, it was a calling. Despite the demands of raising 5 kids, Bolivia made time to nurture her personal growth. She had dreams of becoming a licensed cosmetologist and was actively working toward that goal. Every late-night study session, every early morning routine, it was all part of her commitment to her children. She wanted them to see that even with obstacles, you could still build something beautiful. And then came the unexpected news. She was pregnant again. While the pregnancy came as a surprise, Bolivia embraced it as a blessing. Her family remembers her eyes lighting up the day she announced it. Baby number 6, another chance to love, to nurture, to raise someone who would grow up knowing nothing but affection. 2 days before her life was violently cut short, Bolivia hosted a gender reveal party that symbolized more than just blue or pink. It was a celebration of hope. Friends and family gathered in Fayetteville to share the moment. Laughter, hugs, and good food set the tone for a day filled with joy. And then came the moment. Blue confetti exploded into the air. It was a boy. She and Najee had already picked out his name, Isaiah James. Bolivia clutched her growing belly, 25 weeks along, and smiled through happy tears. In that moment, the future looked full of promise. Her kids danced around her, elated at the idea of a new baby brother. Her mother, Peggy, took pictures with pride. For that brief afternoon, everything felt right. But no one knew it would be the last time Bolivia's children would see their mother laugh like that. Just 48 hours later, the joy of new life would be replaced with trauma, silence, and heartbreak. The same home filled with celebration would become the scene of unimaginable violence. Could you imagine what it must have felt like to experience such joy, only to have it turn into tragedy? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. At first glance, Najee Devin Leach seemed like a man trying to do the right thing. He was present, involved in Bolivia's life, and soon to be the father of her unborn son, Isaiah James. But those close to the couple would say the relationship was more complicated than it appeared. What started off as a seemingly supportive partnership eventually revealed deep cracks that would soon explode into tragedy. Naji wasn't just another boyfriend in Bolivia's life. He had stepped into her already full world, a mother of 5, juggling school, motherhood, and a new pregnancy. To those around them, their bond seemed functional on the surface. Bolivia included him in her children's lives, and their public moments, especially on social media, gave off the image of a united front. But what Bolivia shared with the outside world didn't fully reflect the turmoil brewing in private. While there's no public documentation of prior arrests for domestic violence involving Naji, there were subtle signs, whispers of jealousy, tense arguments, and a growing emotional distance. Bolivia's friends noted that she had started to seem more guarded when speaking about him in the weeks leading up to her death. She wasn't as open, and her once cheerful tone would shift if his name came up. Some of her closest confidants now recall moments that, in hindsight, feel like unheeded warnings. Naji could be controlling, maybe not overtly violent, but intensely possessive. He reportedly questioned who she spent time with and became upset when plans didn't revolve around him. These weren't explosive confrontations, but they chipped away at Bolivia's independence. Over time, it seemed she began shrinking pieces of herself to keep the peace. There was also tension over the pregnancy itself. While Bolivia embraced the baby with love and excitement, it wasn't as clear whether Naji shared that joy unconditionally. He was present at the gender reveal party, yes, but some at the event described him as distracted, disconnected. While blue confetti rained down and Bolivia beamed with pride, Naji stood slightly off to the side, not fully immersed in the moment. And yet, Bolivia, always hopeful, always looking forward, seemed determined to make it work. She was planning for Isaiah's arrival, speaking about him like he was already part of the family. Maybe she believed things with Naji would settle once the baby was born. Maybe she thought love, time, and the arrival of their son would bring them closer. She had overcome so much already. Perhaps she thought she could overcome this too. But no one could have predicted what would happen just 2 nights later. But what led to this brutal act of violence? Was it something that had been building for weeks, months, or even years? Tuesday, June 4th, 2024, began like any other summer day in Fayetteville, North Carolina. There was nothing outwardly unusual. No signs to suggest that, within hours, a celebration would turn into heartbreak. That a home filled with children's laughter would be turned into a crime scene. Bolivia Monique Williams, 33 years old and 25 weeks pregnant, was at home that night with her children. Just 48 hours earlier, her world had been full of promise. Friends and family had gathered to celebrate a gender reveal. Blue confetti had burst into the air, followed by cheers and hugs. She was having a baby boy. Bolivia had named him Isaiah James. She spoke about him like he was already here, part of the family's future. But now, just 2 days later, that hopeful atmosphere was gone. At around 1:30 a.m., deputies from the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office responded to reports of a shooting at Bolivia's residence on the 2000 block of Frontier Drive. When they arrived, they found a devastating scene inside. Bolivia's body was discovered in the home, unresponsive, bleeding, with multiple gunshot wounds. She had been shot several times, with no chance of survival. Medical personnel quickly confirmed what officers feared. She and her unborn son were gone. It was more than a homicide, it was a double tragedy. Bolivia was 25 weeks pregnant. That meant the law recognized her unborn child as a separate victim. What was supposed to be a time of joy and nesting became the darkest night her family would ever face. One of the most haunting aspects of the crime was that Bolivia wasn't alone in the home when it happened. Another person, a witness, was in a separate room during the shooting. That detail alone sent a chilling ripple through the case. Someone else had heard the chaos. Someone had been there as Bolivia's final moments unfolded. The horror wasn't confined to a closed room. It had echoes, gunshots ringing through hallways, waking the quiet of a summer night. And the man responsible? Authorities quickly turned their attention to Naji Devon Leach, Bolivia's boyfriend and the father of her unborn son. It didn't take long to connect the dots. Witness accounts placed Naji at the scene. Evidence, both physical and testimonial, began to mount. But even as facts were being collected, one question hung heavily in the air. Why? What was the breaking point? What transformed a man who had stood beside Bolivia during a gender reveal into the one who would extinguish both her life and the life of the baby she had lovingly prepared for? Was there an argument? A moment of rage? Or had the tension been building quietly beneath the surface for weeks? Neighbors reported hearing shouting earlier that night. Nothing out of the ordinary for some households, but now those sounds seemed more urgent, more ominous in hindsight. No one had called the police before the shots, perhaps because no one expected it to go that far. Or perhaps, as is often the case with domestic disputes, people didn't want to intervene. What's clear is this. Within a matter of seconds, Bolivia's life was taken in cold blood. Her unborn son's life was taken before it ever had a chance to begin. Her children, sleeping just rooms away, were about to wake up to a world without the woman who had been their center. He left behind more than just a body. He left behind shock, disbelief, and a trail of irreversible damage. Police did not disclose whether Naji stayed at the scene or fled, but by the next morning, the sheriff's office had enough evidence to move forward. But this isn't the end of the story. What came next shocked everyone, including law enforcement. Yet, there was something more chilling than just an argument. After the shots were fired, Naji didn't simply run away in a panicked frenzy. He had a plan to erase his identity and escape any connection to the horrific crime he had just committed. He cut off his dreadlocks, an attempt to alter his appearance and avoid being immediately identified by law enforcement. This change in his appearance was not accidental. It was a calculated move by someone desperate to hide their guilt. But Naji's escape didn't stop there. In a move that would later reveal his true intent, he stole money from the house, likely to fund his escape. He didn't care about the tragedy he had caused. He only cared about getting away. And as if to ensure no trace of him would be left behind, he also stole Bolivia's car, which would serve as his means of fleeing the area. By taking her vehicle, Naji tried to further distance himself from the crime scene, but it would prove to be his downfall. The stolen car became an essential piece of evidence, a trail that would lead investigators straight to him. What began as an argument had now escalated into a full-blown crime of violence and desperation. Naji's calculated actions after the murder were enough to convince law enforcement that this wasn't a crime of passion. It was premeditated, and Naji had planned his escape even as he took his victim's life. But this isn't the end of the story. What came next shocked everyone, including law enforcement. The morning after the shooting, June 5, 2024, the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office had a crime scene, a community in shock, and a family devastated. Bolivia Monique Williams, a mother of 5, was dead, her unborn son Isaiah James gone. What began as a quiet night had ended in chaos and grief, and now it was up to law enforcement to untangle the truth behind what had happened in the early hours of that June morning. From the beginning, investigators had little doubt about who they were looking for. Naji Devin Leach. He wasn't a stranger. He wasn't an anonymous suspect or someone who had vanished into the shadows. He was the father of the baby, the man Bolivia had been in a relationship with. The same man who had attended the gender reveal celebration just 2 days earlier. Naji had stood there with Bolivia when the blue confetti exploded into the air, surrounded by cheers and claps. It was meant to be a moment of joy, a snapshot of love and new beginnings. But now, that same man was at the center of a homicide investigation. As soon as deputies processed the crime scene, attention shifted toward locating Naji. The clues pointed to Naji Leach almost immediately. The timing of the crime, the arguments witnessed by others, and the fact that he had been the last person seen with Bolivia all painted a clear picture. But what truly set the investigation into high gear was the deliberate way he tried to change his look, along with the theft of money and the car, indicating a premeditated plan to evade capture. Law enforcement quickly traced the vehicle and began their search, determined to apprehend the fugitive before he could disappear into the night. Cutting off his dreadlocks was more than just an attempt to hide. It was a clear sign that he knew his crime would not go unnoticed. In fact, law enforcement now knew they were dealing with a man who had planned his escape well in advance. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, speaking with neighbors and anyone who might have heard or seen anything unusual that night. Statements from individuals inside the home pointed squarely to Leach. It became clear to law enforcement that this wasn't a random act of violence. It was personal. It was intimate. And it had unfolded in a place Bolivia should have felt safe. Witness testimony and other undisclosed evidence quickly narrowed the investigation's focus. There was no manhunt stretching on for weeks. Najee didn't vanish. He was found and arrested within 24 hours. On Wednesday, June 5th, just one day after Bolivia's death, Najee Devin Leach was taken into custody. The charges leveled against him were severe, and each one reflected the depth of what had occurred. First-degree murder for the death of Bolivia Williams. Murder of an unborn child. A separate and equally devastating charge, acknowledging Isaiah James as a victim. Robbery with a dangerous weapon, indicating there may have been an attempt to take something during or after the shooting. Shooting into an occupied dwelling, a charge underscoring the recklessness and danger posed to others in the home. Each charge painted a clearer picture. This wasn't a crime of passion that ended with a single reckless moment. This was a violent and deliberate act that endangered everyone under that roof. Najee was detained without bond, and his fate now lay in the hands of the courts. The investigation was far from over, but his arrest marked a significant step forward in the pursuit of justice for Bolivia. The public was left to grapple with the horror of what had happened, as well as the chilling fact that someone close to her had been capable of such violence. That decision was met with relief by Bolivia's grieving family. It gave them a small measure of reassurance, knowing that the man accused of taking her life would not be walking free while awaiting trial. For Bolivia's mother, Peggy Blanks, the reality was sinking in. She had just lost her daughter, and now she was left to raise her grandchildren in the aftermath of a nightmare. The community watched as the case began making its way through the judicial system. There was no escaping the emotional weight of the charges. For many, this wasn't just about Bolivia. It was about the thousands of women who suffer in silence, caught in cycles of emotional abuse that sometimes end in tragedy.
From morning to night, we on the phone FaceTiming, talking to the babies, and now it's like my phone ringing because of people that are concerned, but I'm still waiting for my daughter to call. She ain't gonna call me no more.
While Najee Leach awaited his next hearing, prosecutors began building their case. They worked alongside detectives to secure a timeline, strengthen witness testimony, and verify the chain of evidence. The DA's office emphasized the seriousness of the case. They intended to pursue it to the fullest extent of the law. And yet, as the case moved forward, there was still a haunting silence about the why. Najee hadn't issued a public statement. There was no expression of remorse, no apology, no explanation. What do you think about the charges against Leach? Is this justice for Bolivia and her children? Share your thoughts below. But what did his family think? Was there anyone who saw this coming? Or did Najee hide a dark side from everyone he knew? The violent loss of Bolivia, Monique Williams sent ripples of heartbreak through not just her home, but her entire community. In one brutal moment, a loving mother of 5 was taken away, leaving behind children now forced to grow up without the warmth of her hugs, her laughter echoing through the hallways, or the reassurance of her presence during the ups and downs of childhood. Bolivia's children were the center of her world. She was known to juggle the responsibilities of parenthood with grace, even when life threw hardship her way. Her kids never lacked love, attention, or encouragement. And now, with their mother's absence, those 5 young lives were changed forever. The trauma of losing a parent in such a horrifying way is something that no child should have to bear. Yet Bolivia's children now face that grim reality. Some were old enough to understand what had happened, others still too young to fully grasp the weight of the loss. But all of them, in their own way, were broken by it. Their world was now full of questions, confusion, and a deep void where their mother once stood. And to compound the grief, they also lost their unborn baby brother, Isaiah James, a life that never had the chance to begin. In the days following Bolivia's murder, her mother, Peggy Blanks, was left to pick up the shattered pieces of their lives. Peggy was no stranger to hardship, but nothing could have prepared her for this kind of pain. Not only had she lost her daughter, but she was now left with the heavy responsibility of raising Bolivia's children. Her home, once quiet and calm, was suddenly filled with the sounds of mourning, grieving children, the echoes of Bolivia's memory, and the daily reminders of everything that had been stolen from them. Peggy's grief was not quiet. It was raw, public, heart-wrenching. She was vocal about her pain, sharing it not just as a mother, but as a grandmother trying to make sense of a future that had been violently rewritten. She spoke in interviews, posted on social media, and pleaded for justice, her words heavy with sorrow, but also full of determination. Her strength became the backbone of the family in crisis. Despite her personal devastation, she stood strong for her grandchildren, becoming their new source of stability in a world that no longer made sense. And as the story of Bolivia's death spread, the community responded with an outpouring of support. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had never met Bolivia stepped forward. Candlelight vigils were organized, social media was flooded with tributes, and donations began pouring in to help Peggy and the children. The family's GoFundMe campaign gained traction, not only as a source of financial support, but as a rallying point for collective grief and solidarity. People from across the state and even beyond offered prayers, shared Bolivia's story, and demanded justice. Her name became a symbol of the many women who suffer quietly in dangerous relationships, and her death served as a chilling reminder of how quickly things can escalate behind closed doors. The school community also stepped up. Counselors were brought in to work with the children, and classmates created cards and drawings to help express their sympathy. These gestures, while small, served as emotional lifelines for a family grappling with a loss they never imagined facing. But grief is not something that heals quickly, especially not when it stems from violence. Every day is now a struggle, a balancing act between mourning and survival. Bolivia's family is slowly learning to navigate life without her. Birthdays, holidays, and simple daily routines now carry the weight of her absence. The children still call out for her sometimes. They ask questions. They cry at night. And Peggy, heartbroken and exhausted, does her best to answer them, to comfort them, even when her own heart is screaming for the daughter she'll never see again. Justice may be in motion, but for Bolivia's family, no sentence will ever fill the hole left behind. Her story is not just about the crime, but about the consequences. How violence ripples through lives long after the last shot is fired. How will Bolivia's family find closure after such a senseless crime? Will Naji ever be held accountable for the full scope of his actions? The death of Bolivia Monique Williams is more than a heartbreaking true crime story. It's a sobering reflection of a broader crisis that continues to affect countless lives: domestic violence. What happened to Bolivia wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning. A painful reminder that danger often hides in plain sight, sometimes wearing the face of someone we trust the most. Naji Devon Leach was not a stranger. He wasn't a masked intruder or a random criminal. He was Bolivia's boyfriend, the father of her unborn child. Someone she had celebrated with just 48 hours earlier, during one of the happiest moments of her life. That's what makes this story so jarring, the sudden, devastating switch from joy to horror. It exposes how fragile safety can be when it's built on unstable ground. There were no widespread reports of prior arrests or publicized abuse in Bolivia and Naji's relationship. To those looking in from the outside, things may have seemed ordinary. But that's the danger. Because abuse, whether emotional, psychological, or physical, doesn't always leave visible scars right away. Sometimes the warning signs are subtle: controlling behavior, excessive jealousy, isolation from loved ones, or manipulation disguised as care. Too often, those closest to the situation might dismiss these red flags. Victims might downplay what they're experiencing, and in many cases they stay, hoping things will get better, believing love will change the person, or fearing the consequences of leaving. Bolivia's story is not unique in this regard, but it should never have ended the way it did. Her murder highlights a cruel truth: that sometimes the most dangerous place for a woman is her own home. According to national statistics, intimate partner violence is one of the leading causes of death for women, particularly women of color. The system is often reactive rather than preventative, stepping in only after the damage is done. That's why community education, early intervention, and open conversations are absolutely critical. So what can we take from this? First, we need to normalize checking in on the people we love. Not just when something is clearly wrong, but even during the good times. Ask deeper questions. Listen for signs of distress. Create a safe space for people to speak freely, especially when they're in relationships that seem too intense or controlling. Second, we must continue supporting victims, not just with our words, but with real resources. That includes sharing information about shelters, hotlines, and organizations that can help someone escape a dangerous situation safely. Sometimes, a simple reminder that help exists can be the first step toward survival. Third, we have to teach our communities, especially young people, about what healthy relationships look like. Respect, boundaries, and mutual trust aren't optional, they're essential. And jealousy, manipulation, and control are never signs of love. Bolivia's legacy should not end in silence. Her story has the power to open eyes, save lives, and influence change if we're willing to have honest conversations about what happened to her and why. It's not enough to mourn her, we must also learn from her. Have you or someone you know experienced similar red flags in a relationship? Let us know in the comments below. Your story could help someone recognize danger before it's too late. The story of Bolivia Monique Williams will never be just another headline. It's the story of a vibrant 30-year-old woman, a devoted mother to 5 children, and a soon-to-be mother again, who was taken from this world in an act of senseless, intimate violence. Her final days should have been filled with rest, baby names, and excited preparations for Isaiah James, the little boy she was so thrilled to welcome into her growing family. Instead, her life was cut short inside her own home. Her children, some of whom were old enough to understand what happened, were forced into a harsh new reality without their mother. Her mother, Peggy Blanks, is now carrying a burden no parent should have to bear, raising grieving grandchildren while mourning her daughter and unborn grandson. The emotional, psychological, and financial toll is unimaginable. Najee Leach didn't just pull a trigger, he shattered an entire family. And yet, Bolivia's memory continues to live through those who loved her, through the outpouring of support from her community, and now, through this story. Telling it is not just about remembering the woman she was. It's about recognizing how quickly love can turn into something deadly when warning signs go ignored, unspoken, or unseen. The justice system is now moving forward. Leach faces multiple serious charges, including felony murder and the murder of an unborn child. But even a life sentence won't replace the mother 5 children cry for at night. It won't restore the safety Bolivia must have thought she had when she celebrated her gender reveal just 2 days before her life was taken. This isn't just a case to analyze. It's a human life, 2 lives, stolen. It's a family broken, and it's a lesson that cannot be forgotten. If you found this story impactful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more true crime stories. And as always, stay safe and vigilant in your relationships.